I'm going to share my screen, he says, hoping he can. Yep. Give me 1 second, because I want to share with you the strategic priorities for the Chamber going forward for the 12 months for you guys. So I hope you can see this. I'm not going to take very long on it. Somebody give me a thumbs up. I can only see a few of you. Paul, yeah, thank you. So these are our strategic priorities to help you connect, grow and succeed. And hopefully you'll see that it picks up on a lot of what you've talked about there. So under skills, digital being absolutely key. Digital a major part of what we're going to be doing. Access to finance is really, really important. Opening up new opportunities, new markets, international trade, local procurement and supply chains, and sustainable growth and the environment, all of which should help you not just survive, but thrive post-pandemic. So I hope that was useful for you just to see, and we'll be sharing more of that and running events around it. And I will feed back everything you've said into these meetings, from this meeting into our events program. So thank you so much for that. Just to very quickly tell you what we're doing from a lobbying point of view. British Chambers of Commerce, because we're an accredited Chamber of Commerce, we have a direct route into government. Examples we've given to government have changed government policy. A Devon business that was having an issue, we explained to Rishi Sunak, it landed on his desk why their policy was actually hurting business, and that changed government policy. So your voice is really, really important, especially the quarterly economic survey, which is launching soon. That is the largest business survey in the country. By a massive amount, and the Monetary Policy Committee of the Bank of England and BEIS use that when they set government policy. So please fill it in, because it's the larger metropolitan areas that get the investment are the ones that seem to fill that in, and strangely enough, they get the investment. What we're calling for is a 12-month package of support going forward. This stop-start economy, these stop-start packages of support aren't helpful. There are gaps, including directors who have paid themselves through dividend rather than PAYE, who have not had any support at all. And of course, the recently self-employed are not getting the proper support. We're calling for an extension to the furlough scheme to prevent mass unemployment, and also to CBILS and BIBLS, the bounce back scheme and the business interruption loan scheme, because some businesses have still not been able to open, took a loan out a year ago and are now due to repay that loan, but of course aren't even open to do so. So we're calling for an extension for that. And what we're saying is we want that 12-month plan to give businesses the certainty that they need and that confidence to invest in their business, even if the investment is purely staying open. Businesses aren't keen to take on further debt without certainty. So Rishi Sunak is delivering his budget early March. We've said don't wait for that, but if we do, we have to. But there will be, we are assured, significant announcements about a route map out of this pandemic. So watch this space, and your chamber will be campaigning incredibly hard on your behalf to make sure that you get the support that your business needs. So I whizzed through that, I'm sorry, but I want to bring us back on time. I'm now only 1 minute late. And without further ado, I will hand over to Richard Stevens, who's the Managing Director of Plymouth City Bus, who's going to talk about challenges to transportation services and the future opportunities for our region. So Richard, over to you. This is hoping he's still on the call. There he is.
Yes, Stuart. So good morning, everyone, and thank you for your time and indulgence to listen to me for the next few minutes. Although my slides are word heavy, I'm hoping that they will be circulated to everybody. I designed them more as a takeaway rather than a read through. So I'm Richard Stevens, I'm the Managing Director of Plymouth City Bus. For those of you that are interested, I was born in North Devon. I became a bus driver 32 years ago, and I've pretty much either driven or operated every bus between Bristol and Land's End in the last 32 years. And I own now the very first bus that I drove in service 32 years ago. So I am a bit of a bus geek. I have a lot of other roles across the county, and one of my proudest is to be one of Devon's deputy lieutenants, working with the Lord Lieutenant on promoting business in our region. So next slide, please. So just tell you a little bit about Plymouth City Bus. It's gone through a massive change during COVID. I actually increased the size of the company by nearly 45% with an expansion into Cornwall. But we were pre-COVID turning over around an anticipated £45 million, employing 850. I own 300 buses, and pre-COVID, I would have expected to carry around 25 million passenger journeys a year. Things that as a company we're very proud of. We won a Queen's Award for Enterprise in 2020, the very first transport company of any mode to achieve a Queen's Award. We're Investors in People Platinum accredited. I believe wholeheartedly in putting people at the centre of everything that we do, and we've worked very hard to make sure that we are a company that people want to work for and want to do business with, and that boils down to being a great community partner. We also recently won a Chamber Award for customer excellence, which we're very proud of. On top of that, and this is breaking news, I've had my gender pay gap report, and I just want to sort of show off a little bit. 3 years ago, I had a 4.5% gender pay gap in favour of men, and as of today, I have a 6% gender pay gap in favour of women. And we have actively been trying to move the dial on our diversity and representation, and also our sense, fair play. So that's something I'm very proud of. Next slide, please. So you'll be pleased to know that my aim today is not to convert you all to be bus users. Some of you may. I'm not going to run a straw poll, but what I'm hoping to plant in your mind is the value of bus to the community, and also how it may play an emerging part in your life going forward. So the Department of Transport, as you can see, has announced £5 billion of new funding for buses, which is fabulous. We've been in decline. It's been a not loved form of transport for quite a long time. But if we are going to level up, if we are going to have inclusive growth, if we are going to achieve net zero carbon emissions, then mass transport bus has got to play a part in how that is done. Next slide, please. So things that you may not immediately think of. So how bus networks support economic policy. Buses play a vital role in getting people to work. That's pretty obvious. But we also keep the roads freer for those of you that drive cars. The average double-decker bus can replace 75 single-use cars. But it's also about how we are supporting economic opportunities, and to make sure that your workers can actually access the opportunities that you have. And going forward, if buses are embedded in future policy, all strands of government policy and local policy, if future housing developments are designed in a sustainable way, then patently we can help in that low carbon agenda and how we move that forward. But things that you might not be aware of, that, for 1 in 5 bus journeys, the people who use them don't have another choice. It's not a sexy purchase. 17-year-old lads do not run round to their mate's house to show off the bus ticket they just bought. So shifting people's perception of using the bus is really important to us. But what you may also not realise is that 1 in 4 people in the UK is at risk of social inclusion, and 1 in 4 households lack access to cars. And that sense of isolation that Stuart was describing for business during COVID, 1 in 4 people in the UK is at risk of that at any given time. Next slide, please. So we can support social policy. Buses are great for health and well-being. The UK government has set a goal to ensure that people can enjoy an extra 5 extra healthy years. Locally, for those of you who live in Plymouth, you'll know we have a disparity between the east and west of our city of 6 years. It's really important that we get people living healthier, that they can access good food, good health, good education, good support. And so buses have a role to play in that. Let me just breathe for a minute and catch up my slides. Buses are a flexible solution. You may not think it, but we are. We can get into place very, very quickly. And we've demonstrated that through COVID with bus companies up and down the country responding to the pandemic and flexing their services. And that's just an evidence of what we can do. We like to work collaboratively. We like to work with businesses. We can do something bespoke to you, but my experience is often people don't think of it holistically in terms of their investment emotionally or financially to establish good public transport for their operations. Next slide, please. So these are some sort of facts to back this up. So University of Leeds did a study. They discovered that a 10% improvement in local bus service connectivity would have the following benefits: a 2.8% fall in income deprivation, 2.7% fall in employment, 1.4% increase in those with adult skills, and 0.7% increase in post-16 education, and 2,596 years of life saved or fewer years lost. And so, you know, those are just some numbers for you to consider about, would you like to add those kind of values to your lives, your businesses, your communities? And I think that often people just think about bus travel in its purest form, and most people wouldn't use the bus if they had a choice, which is a shame. 45% of the population say they wouldn't use the bus even if it was free. Why? It gets you there clean and green, it gets you there fast, and if you try it, actually it's not as bad as you think it is. Anyway, next slide, please. So I know this is a busy slide, but supporting our environmental policy, as you know, government set a target for zero emissions 2050, Plymouth Council, Devon Council 2030, and by 2050 the government is aiming for almost every car and van to be an ultra low emission vehicle. So how do buses play their part in that? Well, patently we can improve ourselves. So as an organisation, we're exploring greener propulsion in forms of hydrogen or all electric, or a mixture of hydrogen and electric with fuel cells. But there's a lot of work needs to be done on the national infrastructure in terms of the facilities for charging or distribution of hydrogen. And it's really great to see Plymouth leading the way in the hydrogen agenda, trying to work its way forward to be cutting edge across the UK, because for our geography and our topography right the way across the region, an all electric solution looks pretty distant to me, as we would need significant investment in our electric infrastructure to enable all of us to either own an all electric car or a bus for that matter.
Richard, sorry, there's a question in the chat very relevant to that. Can you talk about the cost of trying to buy low emission electric buses?
Certainly. So just to put it in perspective, to buy a low carbon certificated Euro 6 diesel bus costs £230,000 for a double decker. To buy a hybrid version of exactly the same bus is £350,000. To buy an all electric bus is £450,000 for exactly the same bus with all electric propulsion. And to run a fleet of 100 buses, you need to invest around £5 million for the electrical infrastructure to do that. But then that doesn't even begin to cover the cost, because the range of a low carbon diesel is 300 miles a day on one tank of fuel. The range of an all electric bus is around 70 miles, depending on whether your bus is fully loaded, whether it's dark, whether you've got the heating on. So if you have to add in additional recharge time into the cycle of the day, you need more buses to be able to run the same timetable. Hydrogen, on the other hand, is very, very expensive. You're still around that £450,000 to £500,000 mark for a bus, but you are, in terms of range, it behaves like a diesel. So, and you've got that zero emission, and it's green throughout its production if you're using renewable energy to generate your creation of hydrogen. So it's a difficult sell when my profit margin is, well, pre-COVID my profit margin was around 4.5%. I'm embarrassed to tell you what it is now because it's such a big minus. But it's going to take an awful lot of passengers to make that investment. So we welcome the government commitment to mass transport. I'm looking for your commitment for it, because it isn't a sustainable notion that every single one of us is going to own an electric pod to make every journey that we've got, or even an aircraft of that derivative. Hope that answers the question.
Thank
If
you,
you
Richard. We've got 4 minutes, if you don't mind.
Yeah, if you move on to the next slide, that'd be great. I'm trying to get there. 3.5 million people currently do use the bus, and the buses generate £64 billion worth of goods. Greg Lumley's on the call here. City centres, nearly a third of all footfall in city centres comes from bus passengers, and bus passengers typically spend more during a week than people who travel once a week in a car, because they're more involved in their community. For every £1 spent on investment in bus priority, that you can't see it for the photograph, but £7 of benefit of net economic benefit is derived. Next slide, please. So what has COVID done to us? Well, it won't surprise you to know that the message of avoid public transport has pushed down demand. Interestingly, we've had less drop off of passengers than anywhere else in the country. We've done an awful lot of work to make our buses safe. I'm using food standard hygiene measuring on the buses, and we have a better standard of cleanliness, or equal, than you will find in most food establishments. But operational limitations, social distancing, and investment. I mean, I'm running at about a £10 million deficit at the moment on where I would have normally been. Thankfully, the government has stepped in and they're supporting us, but we have to find a path back to stability. I'm a part of a PLC. I have shareholders. We need to be able to make a return on investment. So we really do need to get back to standing on our own 2 feet. And we are competing with cars. That still is our biggest competition. Next slide, please. So the summary is, for me to you, is that buses have a benefit to you whether or not you use them regularly yourself. And going forward, they are going to assist with solving all the UK's biggest community challenges. They can help you live happy, healthy and wealthy lives. And I would ask you to value them. Even if you only made 1 trip a week by bus, you would help me achieve a 10% increase. If you did a return journey, there'd be a 20% increase in patronage, and a corresponding drop off in pollution, congestion, and unsustainable use of carbon fuels. So there we go. Thank you.
Thank you, Richard. That's really, really interesting. I had no idea about some of those stats, and that was just so mind-blowing, and certainly made me think about that and what we can do. I've made a note to think about making sure that all our staff have information about the bus routes that they can use to the office. We've got a couple of questions in the chat, so I just want to cover these. And Selaine, I'm sure you won't mind if we're just a couple of minutes late, but these were, I think, really important. First was about, and I'll ask them both, or say I'll ask them, but one's a question, one's a comment. The question is, how have your team coped with being on the front line? I guess many of us don't forget or don't think about bus drivers as frontline workers during this time, but they need to be out there as a core part of our infrastructure, no matter what. And just before you answer that, Louise has put in the chat, just a thank you from me. The Christmas bus was amazing. My little one and the kids in our street were amazed that Father Christmas was nearby and that a snowman could drive a bus. Made a real difference this year when traditional trips to see Father Christmas weren't possible. Definitely a massive impact on the community. I mean, what a lovely comment. Thank you for that, Louise. But Richard, frontline workers.
So, I mean, it has been hugely challenging. We've had real extremes of response and attitude from people. I've had drivers, we've been sent gifts, we've had lots of plaudits, but I've also had drivers spat on. I've had one had a knife pulled on them when they challenged somebody over a face covering. So we've had a wide extreme, but actually the behaviours of 99% of people have been fabulous and really supportive, and the team have really leaned in. I think the biggest pervasive thing for me has been fear. So, people who come to work to drive a bus aren't normally afraid of what they're doing, but actually COVID has brought a new dimension to it, because they literally have felt like they could potentially catch something and die. And so we've had to really work hard to protect them. Lots of measures to around social distancing we've done internally. The buses, we've worked really hard to make them safe environments for bus drivers. And as a result, we've had, if you can have a really good COVID, we have had good COVID. And the team have been absolutely fantastic. But I think it's about transparency. It's about acknowledging your fears, I'm afraid, and it's also about making sure that there's love in the room, love and respect. And I think that that's the thing, is that you have to be all embracive and you have to be present. I'm working in my home today, but I'm present in my business, and I've driven buses through COVID to make sure that there's not a disconnect between those of my frontline workers and myself, and the fact that we are genuinely doing this together. So I'm not sure if that answers the question, but it's been a tough time for them, and I'm really grateful that people are appreciative of what they are doing. Thanks.
Now, well, please pass on from the business community our thanks to them, because they have been sort of one of those frontline services that have kept the sort of lifeblood of the business community running. So do pass that on. And we've got some great comments in the chat about really interesting presentations. Stats need to be more public, really informative and eye-opening. What I'll do, I'll ask Paul Burton, who sorts out our profile magazine, to ensure that we include a story about this, because some of those stats I think business really needs to know. There is more Q&A time at the end, so if you've got any more questions for Richard, I've certainly got one at least, then please do put time. But thank you for bearing with us. Selaine Saxby MP from North Devon, welcome to our event. Thank you for taking the time to join us. And Selaine's going to talk about the challenges in North Devon and opportunities for businesses in 2021 in a rural region. Selaine.
Thank you, Stuart, and thank you for inviting me along this morning. I'm very jealous of your buses in Plymouth, because we certainly don't have anything like that number up here. So levelling up North Devon, I think when people think about levelling up, there's a lot of talk about the north-south divide. And for me, one of my passions at Westminster is ensuring that coastal and rural regions are represented, and that the levelling up agenda goes right the way around the country. It's not a north-south split. And what we see in our coastal communities is immense deprivation right the way around the coast, and this is something my father taught, was head teacher of a big comprehensive in Newhaven in Sussex, and the issues he saw there 30 years ago are very similar to some of those that I see here in Ilfracombe, and a large number of coastal communities do suffer from deprivation. So if I could have the next slide, please. And I think a lot of that does come from decades of underinvestment since the Victorians stopped coming on holiday here. A lot of these smaller towns particularly have not seen much investment. Of the 40 most deprived coastal communities, 20 are in the Southwest Peninsula, and they are small towns like Ilfracombe in my constituency of 20,000. There is also a lack of connectivity, which I'll come on to talk about more. But in my mind, that's everything from broadband to transport, and to joining our towns together. And I know part of levelling up is joining us up to cities. But the reality is we're not going to get any closer to Plymouth or Exeter from up here in North Devon, and I don't think Barnstable's about to become a city anytime soon. So therefore we need to find ways of connecting ourselves up and improving our links to yourselves down on the south coast where the big cities are, but also recognise we're not that close to a city environment, and therefore how do we become better connected up here? For me, I see a real lack of plans for our smaller communities, and this disjoint between our county and our district councils gives me ongoing concerns. Things as simple as our planning is obviously at a district level and our road network is at a county level. So therefore there is a real disconnect between where people want houses to go. Where I am, it takes me, when we're not in lockdown, it takes me an hour to get to Barnstable, and it's a whole 6 miles. The traffic is worse up here than central London. And that's because all of the building has gone on one road, and there isn't a plan really to address our road network. And I think these sort of more strategic decisions at some point need to be tackled. The other thing that I think I see a lot, and having taught maths prior to my election in December 2019, is a real lack of aspiration. And this is something I talk about a lot up at Westminster, that for me, aspiration and motivation, it's almost endemic. And how do we inspire the next generation? And I think when you're in a city environment, you do see a little bit more about sort of the trappings of wealth, what successful businesses do, whereas up here there's a lot less of that. You know, there aren't people driving around in fast cars. We don't have footballers. We don't have famous rugby players. There's not those things that younger people can perhaps look forward and understand what they could do in the future, or even, you know, the number of people that told me they didn't need their maths, you know, whatever line of work they wanted to go into. And even a young lady, one of my soul destroying moments teaching, when she wanted to be a hairdresser, I was like, well, why don't you try and get your maths, and then you could perhaps run your own salon? No, I don't want to do that. And I think that lack of drive, I find difficult. I don't know quite how to tackle it, but it's certainly a conversation that I'm having with multiple colleagues, because it's not just me that describes these conversations. But I do think, particularly in coastal communities, there's something about looking out to sea that does change your perspective just slightly. And the limited social and geographic mobility, I think that's also a big thing for me here, because I was again staggered at how few people I taught in Bideford, how few people from Bideford had actually been to Exeter, let alone all the way to London. And therefore, it's, you know, obviously our transport networks are challenging from here. And how do we enable people to move up the social ladder when we're even struggling to get around geographically? Next slide, please. And so when I first went to Westminster, I started setting up a connectivity caucus, which is about connecting our sort of remote towns or market towns up to their communities. So they're serviced by small villages around, but those villages are reliant on towns like Barnstaple, like South Molton, like Ilfracombe here, and I'm sure every constituency here has them outside the main cities. And so how do we actually do that? It's things about everything from transport. As you see, I've got a bus, I'm desperate for more buses, transport, the high street, your planning, health, all of those things. And there's now a large number of levelling up committees, which at Westminster I'm delighted to be working on. And I apologise, my computer pings, I don't know how to turn that button off. Next slide, please. As we come out of the pandemic, I think, you know, there is real concern that communities like mine are highlighted as probably having some of the longest recovery times after the pandemic. But I do think we need to really focus on the positives. We are going to have a massive tourism and hospitality bounce back when it opens, and that the domestic tourism boost, I think if we get it right, we can harness for many years to come. I do worry that we need to actually embrace the new world, that the high street has changed. Multi-channel retailing is now with us, online bookings, and a reluctance to move into this digital era is understandable here when so few people have decent broadband. But we do need to find a way to actually ensure our businesses are able to move into that. You know, I'm desperate for my councils to be more proactive and speed up processes such as planning. The levelling up agenda and the levelling up funds are going to come through so that MPs are working with councils to release this money. And the frustrations I have at having no shovel-ready plans in North Devon are immense. So I hope that we can, as businesses, it's lovely to hear the positivity here, and embrace those new schemes such as Kickstart, which is how I became involved with your chamber, was because we didn't have a Kickstart gateway in North Devon. We do now, fortunately, and to really look at the FE white paper as an opportunity to encourage new skills, to encourage those people in the workforce or out the workforce to retrain and to actually take that lifetime skills guarantee. Next slide, please. And so the longer term opportunities, while the next slide is hopefully coming along. So the longer term opportunities that I see up here in North Devon are very much around connecting us. I know somebody said it would take a while, but there is another slide, please. The longer term opportunities that we are looking towards are very much around broadband, that the connectivity in North Devon, I'm the 634th worst constituency out of 650 in the country for broadband speed. So apologies that you can't see my slide. And we need to actually embrace that move to net zero so that we have more innovation within our business communities. And that's all part of skills development and our councils, which I keep referring to because I can't do this by myself. Connecting Devon and Somerset haven't connected Devon or Somerset. And I work personally, I've been in touch with the Chief Executive of Openreach this morning. I personally seem to be trying to connect Devon and getting him to come and connect my schools. And for me, the final slide, which unfortunately the slides seem to have stopped working, the final slide is talking about positivity, building opportunity. And I think So there we go. That's the longer term opportunities. And the final one, please, whoever's in charge of slides. The positivity builds opportunities, and we need to find a way of harnessing what is already being done brilliantly in North Devon. I have incredible innovative businesses up here, which I didn't know existed before I was the MP, and I'm privileged to go and see them now as the MP. But those companies recruit outside of North Devon. They can't get the skills they need here. They recruit internationally, they take on apprenticeships, and we need to find a way to encourage our younger generations, and even those people who are older and now looking for work, to really take the opportunities that North Devon have, because there are vacancies here. And North Devon believes it's being left behind. As we went into the vaccination programme, I have been inundated by people that North Devon's always left behind, North Devon this, and we're not left behind. You know, we have small rural GP practices who've worked flat out to get the the vaccination centres open up here, but we're not going to have a great big hub like you have in Plymouth. And North Devon, I think we need to find a way of harnessing more positivity and recognising that we are the future, that we choose our destiny, and if we don't want to be left behind, we need to take some of those barriers down and start lowering them. And in my mind, there's so much good work going on up here. It's just joining those dots together, improving our connectivity, and hopefully becoming more productive and positive as we move out of this awful pandemic. Thank you for listening.
Selaine, thank you so much for that. And a lot of what you're saying is clearly resonating with people. There's comments in the chat, and I've got some comments about inclusive growth and so forth. And there is a chance for Q&A. Are you able to stay with us for the Q&A?
Yes, I might dive off to a call, but I'll be here in the background.
Yeah, so the Q&A at 11 o'clock, there are questions for you. I think what I'll do is whiz through the other speakers as well, because one of those, Paul Coles, may address that very issue about broadband and what have you, and I'd be interested to hear from him. Thank you so much for your time, and I look forward to joining you. We now hand over to David Hynd, Programme and Partnership Manager of the Heart of the South West Growth Hub, which we're happy to have in our building at Devon and Plymouth Chamber here in Plymouth. David, over to you.
Thanks, Stuart. I managed to unmute myself. Yeah, hi, I'm David. I head up our small Heart of the Southwest Growth Hub team, and my email address is on there if anyone wants to get in touch afterwards. Next slide, please. So just to start off by saying that we're a growth hub here. We're part of a national network of growth hubs around the country, each associated with a local enterprise partnership area. So we cover Devon, Somerset, Plymouth and Torbay, but there's other growth hubs for Cornwall, Dorset, so on and so forth. If you want to find out about what other growth hubs are up to, and indeed what other local enterprise partnerships are up to, there's a LEP network, and I've put the link in the slides. So all the growth hubs are funded a little bit differently, a slightly different mix of services and support, but they all do really what's on the slide. They look to join up national and local business support, so it's easy, or easier, I would say, for businesses to find the help they need. So, you know, get in touch with us. And next slide, please. So our growth hub here, the Heart of Southwest Growth Hub, the growth hub for the Heart of Southwest Local Enterprise Partnership. At its heart, we're a government-funded, free, impartial business inquiry service. So I have a small team of 5 business advisors that speak on the phone, email and online to businesses day in, day out, and connect you with schemes, support, information, advice, guidance, grants if there are them, to help you and your business to move forward and succeed. We also have a pool of local business advisors spread around the area as well, who can spend more time with you actually than my team, do a bit more of a review of your business with you and help put in place plans and actions to move you forward. So help really your journey to, I guess, reset your business, review where you are now, and start to move forward from there. We've got a website, like everyone. So if you type in Growth Hub Devon or Growth Hub Plymouth, it'll come up at the top. Do take a look. There's lots of news items on there. We have a calendar of events and workshops, so you can go on and pick workshops that might suit you, suit your business. Lots in digital at the moment, but others cover in finance and all sorts of topics. Our website gets around 13,000 hits a month, typically. There was a point last year in September where there was a grant scheme, a Kickstart grant scheme, where we had 48,000 a month, a huge spike. So you can see just from that one stat that the money funding finance is still the big issue for businesses. Now, the number one sort of question we get asked about, as well as everything else we get asked about. COVID still features quite highly. The financial impacts obviously being part of that. There's still clearly some confusion out there about the local restrictions grants, some of the government funded support that you may be entitled to. It's quite a complex landscape of funds, really depending on which lockdown period or which tiering period you're applying for funding for. If you're confused at all about that, or just want to be pointed in the right direction, do get in touch with our team at the Growth Hub. We can certainly find the local council that and the specific pages that you need to look at there and help you navigate some of that support options. I'll highlight two sector-specific schemes that we've just recently launched. One for retailers, digital support delivered through our partners Cosmic, and that support is there to help retailers actually exploit digital technologies, drive more online sales, which obviously is a key thing to try and do anyway, but accelerated at this time because of the lockdown rules and closures. So a key offer there. And second one to highlight is for farming and food or food related businesses, you can get some one-to-one advice, a business review and action plan, and that's really helped or really aimed at helping you build resilience into your business and help you to understand what you can do to adapt to some of the changing circumstances. Brexit being an obvious one, but changes in agriculture support, changes in supply and demand, and all those kind of things. So two sector-specific schemes to highlight, and do get in touch if you're interested with either of those. Next slide, please. I will mention skills a little bit. So if you think the way the support landscape's kind of set up through the local enterprise partnership, we've got a growth hub, my team, that primarily deal with business support schemes, grants, advice, guidance, that kind of thing. And there's a skills launchpad that primarily deals with skills and employment and all that big package of support that's available under the skills agenda, growing package of support. Actually, you can contact the Growth Hub for both of those things, but there's you might want to look at the Skills Launchpad website too. I've highlighted just two of the vast array of skills support packages out there at the moment. The Kickstart work placements, which Stuart's already mentioned, and obviously you can speak to your chamber, who are a gateway organisation for the work placements scheme. And just to highlight two, from 3rd of February this week, the threshold for 30 work job placements has been removed, so that gives a little bit more flexibility, I think, although the gateway organisations like Stuart at the chamber could have got around that particular requirement. Anyway, skill support for the workforce, I've highlighted on the slide there. Program developed to help upskilling employees, and I see Kirsty Mottram is on the call, so I'm sure you can message Kirsty directly or get in touch if you want to know more. And I should have also highlighted Smart Skills, which is another one of the schemes, because I see Joe Osgood's on the call to Smart Skills. Has got a comprehensive package of support for upskilling your employees too. Next slide, please. Yeah, some more of the key support probably to highlight. So this first one, growth support program, this is delivered through that pool of business advisors that I mentioned, local business advisors spread out throughout the patch, who in normal times would come and meet with you, sit and have a coffee, discuss your business, review where you are, and help advise on steps or actions to move your business forward. We can still very much provide that and do provide that, but clearly that's being done remotely at the moment. But it's a great package, as well as the initial one-to-one meeting. There's follow-up webinars on digital skills, marketing, finance, HR, other topics, so you can really get into some detail on specific issues relevant to you, as well as that first stage sort of business review, resetting where you are, step and support. Below the line there are a couple of private sector led initiatives. We're seeing a big rise actually in mainly online resources, very high quality, bringing together a range of big companies actually. So the first one I'll highlight there is Be the Business. They've got a website, you can register yourself for it, and you can hook up with peers and like-minded people to share actually your issues, your experiences, and tap into some other knowledge, some other experiences that might be relevant to what you're doing with your particular business. The second one, highlighting Digital Boost. This is free mentoring, free digital focus mentoring and workshops and online courses to help you understand digital better in your business. And again, a bit like Be the Business, this scheme tries to match up volunteer mentors, people who run digital companies, perhaps digital consultancies, or just very good at it. If you're one of those people, you can sign up and register through Digital Boost and become a mentor. And then if you're a business looking for digital support and advice, you can then, through this portal, hook up with one of those mentors that are right for you and actually benefit from their expertise. So a very much I guess a peer networking digital support type service. And we're seeing quite a number of those kind of initiatives coming forward. So a lot of options out there for you to help drive your business plans forward a little. Next slide. I will just highlight two Brexit or UK transition resources. So still a lot of support from government going into helping businesses adapt to the new rules and new regulations. Certainly there are ongoing issues and challenges, and I'm sure you're talking to Stuart and the team and raising those issues where you're coming across them and tapping into the chamber resources as well. I've just highlighted in this slide 3 other places really where you can get support. So one is our Growth Hub Brexit pages, UK transition pages, where you can get information, lots of guides on there, such as how farming support is changing. There's self-help webinars that are sector specific, the government have released that you can take a look at. If you just want to know where to start and actually what are the priorities for you and your business, there's a Brexit checker on the gov.uk site, link in the slide, where you go through a question set such as, do you employ anyone from overseas? Do you share data with companies in Europe? And go through those questions, and it'll produce, the checker will produce a sort of plan for you of what you need to prioritize and what you need to look at and think about. And finally, in this slide, to highlight for more specific Brexit or EU transition issues or challenges, do take advantage of the help desk and one-to-one clinics that are available across the area, available now until end of March at the moment, where you can speak to somebody and get some of your very specific questions answered. I should kind of mention, I think alongside Brexit, that Department for International Trade are putting in a lot of funding and support at the moment to help with exporting, not just to Europe, but all over the world. A particularly great offer for businesses at the moment is the Southwest Export Academy, which is really aimed at people who are either thinking about exporting or very early stages or small scale, where you can get a lot of advice, guidance and information to fast track your export journey if that's what you're interested in doing. Last slide, I think, please. Okay, yeah, so there's the details to get in touch. Any business issue at all, do please get in touch with my Growth Hub team any way you like. You can give us a call, you can fill in the online form, you can email us, or if you just want to stay in touch with schemes and support that are out there, including some of the ones I've mentioned today, then there's a link there to sign up for our newsletter, which we put out fortnightly to 5,000 or so business contacts on that database. So a really great way just to keep in touch with what's out there, what's happening, and what might be of interest and benefit to you. So that's it. I think I've probably given you a couple of minutes back. Stuart, if there's any questions or anything else.
Thank you, David. Really appreciate that. There's some stuff coming into the chat, which we'll get to in the Q&A at the end. I just want to ensure we give our final speaker, Paul Coles, proper time. So I'll hand over straight to him, but please hang on for the Q&A because there are questions for you in the chat there, David, and we'll do that. So Paul, you have 10 minutes and over to you. Look forward to hearing from you. And you were going to introduce yourself because
I was.
You've changed.
Because there's been changes, yes. So hopefully my first slide will load in the background. But yes, when I first agreed to do this, I was BT's English Regions Group Director. I am now, I've left BT after 30 years, all very amicably, and I'm now a senior consultant for a tech company, but perhaps also of relevance as I sit on the Tech Southwest Advisory Board. I've also just joined the LEP as a non-executive director and will be focusing on digital and innovation. And I'm also advising the Southwest Cyber Resilience Centre. So still keeping a very keen interest in tech. So I'm going to do a bit of a whistle-stop tour on broadband. There's much I can talk about. And by broadband, I talk about fixed networks and mobiles. I think it's fair to say that there is an unprecedented level of investment in full fibre in the UK right now. We are talking tens of billions of pounds, probably only bested by HS2. But the reality here is with fibre, it's here and now and being delivered at scale, at speed by many providers, giving the UK a huge amount of choice. And I think we've got at least 2 fibre providers on the call today, City Fibre and Openreach. They are doing great guns to deliver what I would call future-proof technology. And we'll talk a little bit more about that later. But those billions are just in the fixed fibre environment. There are also additional billions being spent on 5G, which will be a complementary technology to full fibre. I often get asked, will 5G replace fibre? Categorically not. It is complementary. And what we'll see with 5G and fibre is a fairly rapid convergence, actually, of how those two technologies combine together and offer new services, which we just, some of those will be mind-blowing, holographic type technologies, amazing work that I'm involved in around smart manufacturing and the use of 5G technologies that is just world leading. I think it's important to say that a lot of this technology in the past has been previously focused in high density areas, typically where population and footfall is, but that's not the reality now with full fibre. Selaine has obviously evidenced her passion around connectivity, not just for her own constituency, but for the UK. And what you're seeing a lot of the operators now move towards is more of a balanced build. In other words, looking at cities and towns and rural areas. And you'll see an awful lot of activity in some unusual places in Devon where full fibre is being delivered to deliver more of a balanced build across both rural and urban. Beware league tables on fibre and broadband, they don't tell the whole story. So when you get price comparison sites talking about broadband speeds, they're talking about evidencing speeds that people are happy with, not necessarily what they could be ordering, and I will come on to that. And it's also worth pointing out that full fibre league tables are again a bit misleading, because in reality, full fibre is about future-proofing us. For the overwhelming majority of the whole of the UK, right now, people don't need the maximum speeds that full fibre will deliver, and I'll evidence that in a minute. But it is about future-proofing us. And as I've said, we can expect more convergence technologies across fibre and 5G coming to the marketplace, which I think is hugely exciting. If I can move to the next slide, please. Yeah, I thought my red circles would move as I sent them over to you guys, and they have moved. So I think one of them has moved, but I'm going to move from left to right, top to bottom. This is a snapshot thanks to a company called Think Broadband that monitor all of the key fibre networks, and I've picked out the stats for Devon. And the key things here, if I look at the first red circle on the left, Super fast broadband, 30 megabits per second. There's around 91% of the county covered. At 30 megs, there should be a couple of you streaming HD quite merrily and doing all the Zoom and team calls you need. If they're not, you need to contact your ISP. The next mark down below shows ultra fast, or those that have got connectivity to over 100 megabits per second. That you will see that number rapidly grow. But the graph on the right that I'll talk to in a minute shows that the vast majority of people are not using the speeds that are available in the ground, but I will come to that. Now, there's been a bit of an errant move there of a red circle that should have sat over the OpenReach, it should have sat over on the below 2 megabits speed. That one's moved, which is the second column top stat. What we're evidencing here, and the stat below it relating to 10 meg, is there are still some people though that don't have the connectivity that they need and are struggling, and COVID has brought that into sharp relief. I will talk about how some of that can be addressed fairly rapidly, but those are the folk that I think we need to concentrate on, and there are some solutions for the overwhelming majority of those in my view. But I just want to turn to that graph. Thankfully, the red circles have stayed in place. And if you follow the green chart, the green line, you'll see that the average speeds are across Devon that people are experiencing are around about 36 megabits per second. That is actually more than enough for 2 or 3 HD streams plus other people doing email in the house. But the reality, and the last oval circle, is that if everyone ordered what is available to them right now, so we all maxed out on the speeds available to our home and business now, the average speed would jump to an astonishing 275 megabits per second across Devon. What that tells me is that there are plenty of people that could be upgrading their services to enjoy faster speeds. Not everyone, but a significant, I would suggest, majority could be looking at that, because there's plenty of capacity for a lot of people to upgrade their connectivity. Next slide. 5G, I could talk probably for an hour on this stuff. What is 5G? First thing to say, it is the next generation from 2, 3, and 4G, but it is not like 4G. It's not 4G, but faster. That is unfortunately how it will be marketed. The reality is 5G allows for a couple of key things in my view. One, it allows for the first time ever a proper convergence of fixed and mobile networks together to deliver new services that the sector has not been able to deliver before. And that's hugely exciting. And as I said before, there's some really interesting stuff going on around smart manufacturing as just one sectoral example. The other key thing for me is it delivers much lower latency rates when you are using 5G. Why is that important? I won't name the brand, but it's a global brand. You would recognize it. They bought a bunch of guided autonomous vehicles to work in a factory. They couldn't get it to work. The company I'm now working for, working with a partner, has used 5G because of its latency characteristics to control those guided autonomous vehicles, and now they work. In other words, they're not running people over in the factory, and they're not bumping into it, racks full of expensive equipment. Now, in a 4G world, you just couldn't do it. In a 5G world, you can do that. You can do greater integration, and you can take advantage of the latency characteristics of what 5G delivers. So I expect to see a lot more around that in the AI space and augmented reality piece. There's some fascinating stuff going on in entertainment around 5G, which is truly, truly exciting. So huge investment there by the mobile operators around 5G, and huge opportunities for businesses to get hold of that and utilize it. I'm going to finish this slide by saying one other key characteristic of 5G for me is, traditionally with the mobile networks, you've sort of got to wait for the mobile network rollout to land where you are, and 5G is concentrating initially on the major population areas. However, one key concept that I think will expand more rapidly with 5G is the concept of being able to buy your own private 5G network. And the manufacturer that I mentioned before is looking to do exactly that. In other words, they can deploy it regardless of whether the rollout is coming to them in their own environment and use it for their own purposes. And that's equally applicable if a farmer wanted to do it because they're looking at using robotics to maintain the land, or to pick fruit, for example, which is a very live discussion topic. So huge excitement around 5G. It is different, and there's no reason why South West can't take advantage of these technologies and use it where people have got genuine application requirements for it. Next slide. So I'm going to finish on a rapid tour of, how do we help those people that don't have the speeds they need? Well, the first thing is, you will be genuinely surprised. In my old job, the number of times I had people coming to me saying, I've got poor broadband, and when I asked them to check, I hadn't checked whether they could order upgraded speeds, and therefore they went away and did it. And that probably took about a 30 to 40% of all my inquiries out of my inbox into the done box. You've also now got the government's universal service obligation that will help address those people below 10 megabits per second in terms of getting an uplift on speed. However, that is quite complex, and there is a limit on the amount of cost, if you like, to achieve the connectivity to the premise of about £3,400. So it isn't the answer for everyone, but if you're in a small cluster of low connectivity, you might be able to bandy together to make it happen. You do have a refreshed phase 2 Connecting Devon and Somerset program out there now, which will address a few tens of thousands more properties. That's good news. So more coming from that perspective. One thing I would say as both a tactical and potentially a long-term solution is to look at 4G. I would firmly contend that the overwhelming majority of those people that don't have the speeds they need right now could be resolved by 4G from one of the mobile operators. I've done extensive work on this, and it is solving many long-term issues of people not getting the connectivity they need. Not everyone, but many. The advantage of that, of course, is that if it gives you the speeds you need now, you can wait for the fiber rollout to land where you are, knowing that at least you can work and you've got a future-proof technology to come along, and you can swap for that when it arrives. So it gives you flexibility, and is a solution I strongly recommend people look at if they are really struggling right now. And I know Selaine is particularly passionate about this, and I'm hopefully not too guilty of mentioning my old company, but I know that many people in poor broadband areas have looked at using Openreach's Community Fibre Partnership and the extensive funding that government has put out there to help deliver fibre where they don't have fibre broadband yet. With Selaine's lobbying and work by other members of Parliament, there are now several billions of pounds of investment that the government is putting into this as well. So it is an unprecedented level of investment across both private sector and government sector. I'm acutely focused on the relatively few numbers of people that don't have the broadband they need. The majority of those, I think, could be solved fairly rapidly. There will be some really, really hard to do's. And if I can just finish by giving you a sense of scale of what a hard to do means, we are seeing in some circumstances now an individual premise costing over £100,000 to connect. That's the challenge when you get into some of the deeply rural areas in terms of the cost of delivery of this stuff. So if 4G coverage can help solve them in the short term and in the long term, great. I think inevitably some people will be looking at satellite, but it's a relatively small number across the whole of the UK. And the big message is, whether it's 5G or fibre broadband, it is a massive tens of billions of pounds investment that is going into the UK. So lots to do there. I'm happy to try and help people, with some of this if needs be, and signpost them. Which I've done before. And if I need to do that in my spare time to help people, I will do. That's it. Stuart.
Thank you, Paul. Really appreciate that, and good to hear all those updates and what's going on. I mean, so we're going to start the Q&A now, and I've got
we've lost you.
questions filling the chat. So who asked a question? I just want to start.
Stuart, you've frozen. Can you hear us? You keep freezing.
How ironic. So that's what I was going to ask. How come, this is a really personal question, I'm sorry, but I've got super fast broadband.
Yeah.
How come I get unstable internet? What does that mean? What's going on?
The challenge for the industry is no one owns the end-to-end experience, right? So, you think of the amazing work Zoom has done in standing up a platform that's gone from a few thousand, if not millions of users, and then all of a sudden COVID hits, and then we all change the way we work in seconds, right? So some of this could be the platform, the Zoom platform or the Teams platform or the Hopin platform not functioning correctly at any 1 second. Some of it might be your Wi-Fi. I love it when people put Wi-Fi routers by fridges or Christmas lights because it disrupts the signal. This is radio frequency. So there are things that we can all do in our houses, right, to make things better, and work with your ISPs if you need Wi-Fi boosters to make Wi-Fi better. The reality of it is, if the Southwest was in such a dire position, I can tell you our economy would have tanked if broadband wasn't working, because we've all had to change the way we work. And I'm about selling the Southwest. Yes, we've got some pockets that need the connectivity that they haven't got right now, but actually plenty do, and let's focus on the ones that don't.
Thank you, Paul. That's good to know. Just very frustrating, isn't it?
Yeah. But it might not be your broadband. It might be the Zoom platform. It might be the Teams platform. It might be Hopin. Think of the CO2 we have saved in not traveling somewhere to do this meeting.
Absolutely. I mean, I had said to my team since the time I took the job 2.5 years ago that we should consider putting our events online. And it was just one of those things that became hard to do. It was in the sort of too difficult to do box. Then a pandemic hits, and within a week, everything's online. It's accelerated our use of technology massively. Thank you to Sally Bell, who is from OpenReach and has put a link in the chat there for practical tips. Ivor, are you there? Because I saw you put a really good question in the chat, and I know that Selaine's answered partly in the chat, but I'd like her to speak and answer that question fully. Ivor?
Yeah, I'm here.
Thank you, Ivor.
Yeah, it's just one about understanding, and it's not just North Devon, it's into Cornwall, South Devon and other areas. There are lots of small industries that have struggled in the past through underinvestment. We're starting to see reinvestment, but actually, particularly I was focusing on Appledore, and the national strategy, the national shipbuilding strategy focuses on the big players in North England and Scotland, and doesn't concentrate on the small to medium people that generate real wealth and growth in their area. And how do we see that changing? Or is it effective, shall I say?
Thank you. Selaine, are you there to answer that? And while you're unmuting and coming on the call, hopefully, I say, how can we as a chamber support the ambitions to level up? What can we do? I'm just checking, do we still have Selaine on?
Yeah, I'm here, Stuart.
Sorry.
Yeah, thanks, Ivor, for the question. And I think these national schemes are fantastic because they sort of give it the focus that they need. But one of my pleas from the moment I was elected is to have smaller versions of them for smaller communities. So something like the Future High Streets Fund, which has taken my council 18 months to get to a point where we have now won the money, or at least some of the money. We need a smaller, I call it the Tiny Towns Fund, but get told off that actually they're not tiny, but a coastal fund, a market towns fund that represents, so that we can actually bring that investment in. So there's a smaller version, and recognise where we've got small councils, they don't have the resource to bid for endless pots of money, particularly if it's the same people who perhaps aren't successful. And so for things like the National Shipbuilding Strategy, certainly there's a big push to see what else we can do. And I'm personally working on, I've set up the All-Party Parliamentary Group for the Celtic Sea, which is looking at supporting a wind turbine project, which is worth 1.8 billion as it comes through. So there is work going on, and we're therefore fighting hard to get that project down here, and by setting up a group of cross-party MPs to look at what else we can do when we look upwards towards our Welsh neighbours over that piece of water, who are significantly nearer to me actually geographically than yourselves down in Plymouth. So how can we actually harness that? And I think it is about thinking creatively. And the question about the chamber, Stuart, I think it's, where you are in a big city centre, any of the skills, which is how I ended up in touch with Helen in the first place, that you have that can be shared with some of the smaller chambers, and to provide that reassurance that some of the things that you've perhaps done as a city do scale down okay for a smaller community. And I think the biggest fear I have coming out of this is that having a small council that we will fall behind on funds. My office is already, I've interviewed this week and had to ask people coming into my office, can they write bids for government funds? Because already my office has had to submit one on behalf. Fortunately, the council are now stepping in, but I recognise the council's under huge duress. You know, they're handing out 6 different grant schemes at the present time. So anything that the Chamber can do to support those, so if you have got projects or initiatives, I think the bid writing for smaller communities like ours to actually ensure we get the money, because that's my absolute fear, having just found another scheme that I know that even Exeter City Council has successfully bid into, yet in North Devon nobody even knew that they were eligible to apply. And I think that's the frustration. So as a Chamber, I guess anything you see that you think you can have and can share with us in smaller communities, or, you know, be proactive and nudge your MP or your council to bid for, because I think, having run a business myself for 15 years, you have different skills when you run a company. You have to have eyes in all over the place. You're entrepreneurial, you think outside the box, you try and get something even if it wasn't really for you. So take those skills. You know, when you see a scheme, we're keen to give the money away from the centre into communities that need it. But we need the support around us as MPs to be able to deliver that for you as the businesses.
Yeah, and I think there's something there about joining us all up a bit more. So, you know, I chair British Chambers of Commerce Southwest, which is that logo there, which is all the county accredited chambers: Cornwall, Devon, Dorset, Somerset and Business West. And, you know, we're keen to work much more closely with the all-party parliamentary group for the Southwest on a lot of these issues, because we feel we are that voice of business. You know, we've got 500,000 employees across our region who, you know, we can help you with these very things. So, I mean, I'll definitely pick up with you afterwards, because we want to work much more closely with the MPs in the region.
Yeah, and unfortunately that all-party parliamentary group hasn't, unfortunately for many of us, delivered, and so that's become quite, which is why we're, you know, things like the Celtic Sea. I obviously now chair broadband, and I know that the business team are interested in talking, and I have suggested it straight into Quasi that they talk to chambers of commerce to make sure that we get the voice of small business. So if you haven't heard from Bays out here, please let me know, and when I'm with him next, as I'm now on a panel with him once a week, I will make sure that that gets fed back in for you.
Thank you, Selaine. I mean, you and I should definitely catch up more often. You know, I must say to everyone on the call, the Chambers of Commerce are completely apolitical. We will work with whoever is in power. We do not make political comment, but I'm glad, Selaine, that you said that APPG hasn't delivered as much as it should, because that is the feeling of business. I think we've got a lot to say about getting behind the Great Southwest, but that powerhouse has never come to be. And in BCC Southwest, we think we can help that happen. So a question for Richard was about hydrogen powered. I'm just checking whether he's still on the call. Forgive me, I've got so many faces in front of me, I don't know if he's still here. But Richard Stevens, hydrogen powered buses, and there is an argument that the government's going down the wrong route with electric because of the infrastructure problems, recharging and what have you. I mean, you know, I live in a Peveril Park terraced road where there's no way you can get a recharging point out to your car. But the infrastructure for delivering hydrogen is the same as the infrastructure for delivering petrol. And we've got that infrastructure there already. We've got service stations all over the country. Do you think the government's going down the wrong route? Should we push much more towards the hydrogen route for buses?
I think that I don't think the government's gone down the wrong route. I think different solutions for different places. So you've got to have the right horses for the right courses. I do think that some politicians did get wrapped up in electric early on because they were able to see some sort of instant results, but actually the barriers to it are pretty immense. And of course, electric vehicles are only green at the point of use. They're not necessarily green at the point of generation, notwithstanding the Southwest's ability to produce renewable energy from wind and tide, etc. I think we've been very late to the party on hydrogen, but the government is now sort of really driving and has announced that it's going to, you know, have a first hydrogen city, looking at the practicalities of that. I mean, for me, hydrogen is a more exciting proposition than electric, on the basis of the fact, as you say, the migration from where we are to zero emission would be easier because you can actually burn hydrogen in the current petrol or diesel engine vehicles. but the technology around fuel cells is pretty exciting too. So effectively it's an electric vehicle, but it's a hydrogen fuel cell that's generating the electricity to turn the turbine. And the first of those buses have now been rolled out in Aberdeen. But I think that the world will wake up to this pretty quickly. And I think if the political will sits around it, it is likely to be a much more viable solution for rural Devon, rural Cornwall, rural Somerset, than actually an all-electric solution for the reasons you outlined. You know, the notion that we will all be able to plug an electric vehicle in, or to, you know, Petric stations. Plymouth is going to have the first Petric station, allegedly. But the idea that we're all going to queue up and wait for 20 minutes or half an hour of deep charge is just nonsensical. Yeah, I don't know that they've gone down the wrong road. I'm just really happy that hydrogen is fast coming up as a real consideration, because I think for our area, it probably is a stronger candidate.
Thank you, Richard. I've had a private question to me in the chat aimed at David Hynd, saying, what is happening with the next round of self-employed grants? I've heard that people have not been contacted since the second round. Are you able to answer that question, David?
Unfortunately, don't have any more information at the moment on that. Like everybody, I think we're expecting to hear, or hoping to hear, some kind of updates, some kind of announcements. You know, with a lot of those schemes come to an end, as you mentioned as well, Stuart. But no, I'm afraid nothing yet on that.
Okay, thank you. Do we have any more questions for our panelists, Selaine, David, Richard, or Paul? If you do, please either put them in the chat now or raise your virtual hand in the participants function. I'm quite happy to hear from any of you in person, so to speak. I'm just looking around. So don't raise your actual hand because I won't be able to see it. I've got so many faces in front of me, but if you've got a virtual hand you want to raise, please do. No? Okay, so this has been really, really helpful. Thank you. Firstly, from my point of view, in getting your candid feedback about what you need from your chamber, and we will definitely take that on board. I've got a page of notes and we'll look at what we can roll out. I'm pleased to tell you that some of that is already in hand. I must thank our speakers. Thank you so much for the time you've given to us, to Richard Stevens, City Bus, and of course they are a patron too, to Selaine Saxby. We appreciate at the moment you must be incredibly busy, so I'm so grateful for the time you've given, and I think it's very important you and I catch up much more often and ensure that we're joining up the whole of Devon, because we are the Devon and Plymouth Chamber of Commerce, and I want to make sure we don't miss out any region of our lovely county. Thank you also to David Hynd. I know you've got a lot on at the moment, so I'm very, very pleased you took the time to join us and to give us the interesting updates from the Growth Hub. We value the relationship we have with the Growth Hub very much, and I'm glad you're in our building. I think it helps join business and the LEP so well and so practically. And to Paul Coles, you know, your insights into the broadband is just fascinating. Thank you for your time. So grateful you joined us. Once again, thank you to the LEP for sponsoring this event. I hope you all agree it's been a really, really interesting, not just that, but it's raised some really thought-provoking stuff and stuff we can take forward. So thank you for that.